It's here. It's now. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Bettina. I'm going to say it wrong. Kurz.
Good.
Good. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Very, very excited to be here.
The Wine Talks, of course, available on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you hang out for your podcasting. And something new that I'm talking about in this show is there's no swirling, no sniffing. I'm so tired of these shows where they're talking about wines and telling you. And what could be worse than somebody trying to listen to a show while they're swirling and sniffing and you have no idea what they're looking at or talking about? So we're not going to swirl and sniff today. I just had a conversation with Dan Berger, who's one of the great wine journalists of America. So listen to that, folks. It's going to be online. Actually, it's up right now. Great conversation about all things wine in America, and such a fresh take on the wine industry and consumerism of wine, which is what we do. But not why we're here. Here to have a conversation with Bettina, and we are going to talk about owning a winery in Europe and America and what it takes and sort of those conversations. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
What is the name of your company? I forgot.
The name of my company is Viva-Business.
Viva-Business.
So it's Italian word for Viva and English word business.
And you are in San Gim. Man, it's early. It's not early in the morning, but it's morning here.
Yeah, I understand.
San Gimignano.
Yeah, I'm actually in San Gimignano. My company is based in Germany, but I'm actually in San Gimignano in beautiful Tuscany because I have several projects here where I'm working on. So that's why I'm here now.
So this is. I was just thinking about this before I came into work today, and I thought, maybe we're talking really not only to sort of a real estate transaction when it comes to wineries, but you're also sort of a mergers and acquisition person. In other words, you're marrying somebody looking for a winery. There's lots of numbers involved. There's revenue. There's supplies. There's inventory. Is that basically what you're doing?
Yes, definitely. It's a merger and acquisition process. It's not wineries very often comes with real estate, but normally, first of all, financial figures are important.
So are you? But blah, 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 easy for me to say. when you're doing these things, would you say they're 50-50, come with the real estate and the chateau or the villa, or that's mostly the real estate with the transactional part of it?
So we are, as well as most of our clients, are focused on the pure wine business. But of course, very often it comes with real estate, and you need some real estate. You need a cellar, you need a farmhouse to welcome guests for tastings. So it is always linked to real estate. We are not a real estate broker, but of course we know how to evaluate real estate in various regions.
There's there's sort of philosophy, I guess, in business in general, when you have a company, and I'll admit, with the Wine of the Month Club here in America, after my 35th year, my strategy really was to sort of move the company around and use the company to acquire the real estate, in the sense of supporting the mortgage with leasing it to the company. But it would seem to me, if I'm buying a winery, I'm going to want that vineyard. I'm going to want that villa. Is that not generally the case?
It might be difficult when somebody just wants to buy the wine business and is not interested in a villa, in a chateau, whatever comes with it. Yeah, but and then of course we have let's say other clients who are looking for a beautiful villa, for a beautiful chateau with the vineyards just around the villa. It's sometimes it's really difficult to find a perfect fit. But we do have a lot of wineries to offer. So we talk with the client, we suggest some businesses who might be the right fit, and then we start from there.
So when a client calls you, and you're worldwide, we'll talk about those regions momentarily, but when a client calls us, look, I want to get into the wine manufacturing of wine, and I've never done it before. What's your first piece of advice? are you nuts or what?
Well, it's not that we give immediate advice. We first of all ask a lot of questions. So we want to know what is the reason why you want to get into wine business? What is your favorite wine? What wine regions do you love? Do you have a favorite region you want to go into? All these kind of questions to understand where he come from, of course, what is his core business and so on, where does he come from, and where does he want to go to? So is it more a lifestyle investment? Is it a family house with some nice vineyards around? Is somebody able to distribute wine with the help of his other companies worldwide? So there are a lot of questions to ask before we can give advice.
Do they come to you thinking, and I'm sort of saying this tongue in cheek sarcastically, and I have my own viewpoint, particularly in Southern California and Northern California, trying to buy a winery. Do they come thinking that this is going to be a profitable adventure, that this is going to be so much fun, that we're just going to live this lifestyle and we're going to have wine and we're going to sell it all over the world, we're going to travel? Is that the general anticipation?
No, it is not, because most people are no, definitely not. No, most people are coming from other businesses, being entrepreneurs for most of time of their lives. Of course, they know what business mean. They know what merger and acquisition mean. They really come to the point, and they're looking for an investment which with a return of invest at a certain point of time. Of course, they sometimes do not know that having a winery, owning a winery, there's a lot of work to do, even if this is a profitable winery. So there's always a lot of work to do. It's not only the work in the vineyards, not in the cellar, but of course a lot of work in marketing and distribution. So and then we start to advise whenever we understood what somebody's looking for, what he wants to do, what is his background, what he is capable to do, and what he's not capable to do. And then we start talking about different opportunities.
You find then, because you're worldwide, correct? You sell vineyards and
with a
wineries.
focus on Europe, but we are working worldwide.
And when it comes to the clientele that comes to you, or would it be an Italian buyer that's looking for an Italian villa or winery, or do you see sort of a mixture of ethnicities reaching out to different parts of the world to make wine? Like, let's say a German who wants to buy a winery in Argentina, those things, or is it mostly staying home?
Yes, yeah, it's a complete mixture. It's not really. Sometimes, of course, we have Italian people asking us to give a hand finding another Italian winery in a different region, but we have a lot of clients who are looking in other countries. Or sometimes they just come and say, okay, look, I'm looking in maybe in Europe, but I'm open to buy something in South Africa, or what about Argentina? So, of course, this is the way we start talking.
It's such a difficult business, and it really is farming. I mean, if you're buying, of course, the vineyard, then I suppose it's more farming than not. But when it's all said and done, owning a winery is about what's coming from the field, what's coming from the farm, and then creating wine. Do generally your clients go into this thinking, well, I'm going to elevate this, I'm going to take it to the next level, or I'm just looking for a place to make wine to satisfy a personal need to be in the industry and want to produce a product like wine, which is so telling of the world, of the soil, of the area it's grown? Or do you think, like, for instance, there's a lot of, not a lot, but there are wineries, for instance, in Australia that were owned and were bought up by executives of American soda companies. And their idea is, we can sell liquid in a can, I should be able to sell it in a bottle. And then they find out that, selling soda is a lot different than selling wine or alcohol. So do they come into it thinking, well, I'm going to advance this facility and make it better than it is?
Yes, definitely, because most of these entrepreneurs, they come from other businesses. They are used to make it more profitable. So yes, they are interested in doing this. And of course, then we start with our advice that, of course, the best work is done in the vineyard, not in the cellar, because whenever you have sane grapes, then you are able to produce a good wine in the cellar, and that's the important fact. So nowadays, there's also a lot of interest in organic wine production, which wasn't like that 20 years ago. So organic, even biodynamic. We have clients asking for kosher wine production. Vegan production. So there's a lot of interest. And yes, people who are interested in vineyards nowadays, they want to take it to the next level.
How long have you been doing this?
How
long have you been doing this?
Oh, I'm in the business now for 12 years.
And so what would be the least expensive manufacturing, going concerns, we would say, that you've sold? The least expensive?
The least expensive. Well, that's a difficult question.
Okay, how about the most expensive?
Okay, so start from the most expensive, which was about 150 million.
Wow. Okay.
Euros. Yeah.
Euros, which is I don't know what the exchange rate is today, but it's probably 5%, 9%.
Yeah. And then the least expensive is more that people are going to invest, because normally,
I see.
Because least expensive would mean we start from 3 million onwards, talking about European vineyards.
So the lowest valued, forget the a partial interest in a winery, but the lowest complete value of a winery sold, whether it was a syndicated or whether it was a sole owner, would be 3 million is where you start. Yeah.
And then we are talking about, depending on the region, we are talking about 1 hectare, 3 hectares, 5 hectares, 10 hectares, but not more. So
10 hectares for the listeners would be 22 acres or so.
Yeah.
Which is a substantial amount of land for that. And the reason I asked is is the trend in prices right now for wineries headed upward, or is it stable, or is it headed downward a little bit?
Now, it's always increasing a little bit because there's a huge interest in vineyards. And for most European regions, for the renowned regions, of course, it is increasing.
And so, because there's this whole thing about the millennials, the Gen X's, Z's, whatever letter we're on, they're not buying as much wine. But I'm wondering if that's more of a North America issue than it is worldwide, because wine in the culture in Europe is much more stabilized and more embedded than it is in America. But consumption's up in your part of the world then?
Yes, consumption is up, but it has also changed because people with all these online shops nowadays, they do not buy directly at the winery if they're not visiting a special area, having holidays there. But then they tend to order online, especially after the pandemic times.
One of the, and I was just looking at a report yesterday from my good friend Paul Mabray, who was with Silicon Valley Bank as the wine consultant there. He's a very bright and metric-driven guide. He put up a chart yesterday on social that basically was showing not only e-commerce down across American regions of wine, but the tasting room traffic as well. And I don't think that listeners understand or know that in general, European wine districts don't have that open door tasting policy that we have in Napa, Napa's become sort of a destination for people to go, and they kind of get in their car and they drive around to different wineries and they have a full day and they come back to the hotel. You don't really do that in Europe generally, do you?
Well, we do it. Yeah. A lot of people, a lot of wineries are now open. They have tasting rooms. They welcome people, but it's not like in Napa Valley that they really have this big restaurants and welcome people and they can spend the whole day there. It's more like a specific, you go there, you have a tasting for 1, 2, 3 hours. eventually with a nice lunch or dinner, and then you buy some wine, you go home. So that's different. Or you spend time in a, let's say, winery where there's also a hotel. So then you spend time over, let's say, a few days. And then, of course, you have more time to explore the wine business. Then you can also go into the vineyards with the owner or with some staff. You get guided tours. So this is all offered. And people understand nowadays that it is important to have people directly on the ground to sell their wine.
I mean, it's like I said, I can't reference Europe. I can certainly reference America, and the Napa Valley being, the preeminent district. And it's, it's a lifestyle ambition, but they find out that, grapes are very expensive, $15,000 a ton to make wine. It's, the general thumbnail for Napa is if you're paying $15,000 a ton for grapes, then you're going to have to charge $150 a bottle just to have some kind of margins. And that's, that's hard to find buyers all the time in that price range. So you have to build this sort of following around your brand, which is very difficult to do. If I come to you and say, look, I want to buy a winery, Bettina, and I really want to be in the Rhine. And what metric do you use to evaluate the value of that winery? Is it a profit margin issue? Is it a processing capability? Is it the source of the grapes, the contracts the winery might have? What are all the pieces that go into saying, yeah, we think this winery is worth 150 million euros?
Yes, first of all, it's the price of the vineyard. So all the assets which come with this wine business. So we're starting with the vineyards, evaluating the vineyards in a special region. So talking about 20,000 up to 1 million, 1.5 million per hectare in different wine regions, not only talking about Germany, but talking about general Europe, Italy, France. And then we are evaluating, let's say, the cellar equipment, of course, the EBITDA. It's a kind of due diligence, like a M&A acquisition. And it is also important to understand, yes, the process in the complete chain of wine production. Yeah, so is it, how modern is the equipment? What do they do? Is it already organic certified? So all these kind of different levels we have, then to find out which is the right price.
Because I work with a very close friend here that does a little bit of this in America, who actually is quite adept at it. I'm assuming the metrics would be the same. In other words, if I'm going to buy a winery in Europe or in Napa, I'm going to look at probably the same kind of numbers and determine its value based on that. Is owning a winery not key personnel related? In other words, I've never made wine in my life. I drink it at home. I think I understand it, but I'm going to buy a winery now. I got to make sure my key players are intact all the time. How do we do that?
You mean the key players are intact? What do you mean?
But like make sure the winemaker's not going anywhere when they find out that the family's selling, or making sure the director of marketing is not going anywhere because the current owner is selling. Do you have any issues or any problems with key personnel wanting to move on because of the ownership change?
Okay, I understand. No, very often, of course, the key personnel working for a long time for wine business, they are very much interested in staying. So it's of course the new owner's decision if he wants them to stay, but most of the time, the enologist, the winemaker, the agronomist, people working as staff on the winery. Most of the wineries have their staff who wants to stay, and most of the new owners wants them to stay, at least for the first 1, 2, 3 years.
Do you see a difference amongst loyalty and or manufacturing processes between countries? In other words, like you just said, that the winemaker's probably going to want to stick around, he or she, to help the new owner. But you see a difference in loyalty from different parts of the world? Like Napa, they're not as loyal, or they are more loyal?
I can't say that in general. No, it really depends on the team on site. Yeah, so this is something you will find out whenever you go and visit, when you're going to talk with all these people at the winery, when you start talking with a winemaker about what he wants to do in the future. And of course, you have to find out if it's really the right fit for the new owner. Sometimes a winemaker, which is used to do the same work for 20 years and he has a certain age, sometimes really doesn't want to change completely. So then, of course, it doesn't make sense to keep him. And at that point, some of these winemakers also realize that and say, well, I can stay for another year to help the owner to get acquainted with all the process. But then after a year, I really want to leave, maybe start a new little project.
Well, you seem like you're pretty straightforward. So would you ever tell anybody, look, I don't think this is a good idea for you. I don't think you quite understand, what you're getting into. Do you just make that advice?
The advice? What kind of advice?
Do you ever tell somebody, look, it's not for you. I don't think you should be doing this.
Well, not that directly, but of course you understand quite. You sometimes understand quite well if it is the right fit for somebody or not.
All right, we're gonna role play a little bit, and I'm gonna call you, and I got your name off of the internet, which is where I stumbled across your LinkedIn listings. So I'm going to call you now and say, hi, Bettina, I'm Paul. I live in Southern California, and I've been interested in a winery, an organic winery in or around Siena, Italy. Do you have anything?
Yes, of course, we have different opportunities, but let me ask you, what are you looking for? Do you have any idea about the size, about the wine region you are looking for? Do you have special wine you like?
Well, I'd like to produce between 15 and 25,000 cases a year. Certainly a big fan of Sangiovese. That's why I want to be in or about Siena. And, this is going to be a hobby. It's going to be fun. I want the lifestyle. I want to bring my kids and my family, and we'll stay at the chateau or the villa for a little bit, and then we'll go. But I want to make money.
So you want to make money. Okay. So talking about the region around Siena and or all around Tuscany, there are a lot of vineyards that make Sangiovese. But of course, if you want to make money, you have to go to the renowned wine regions like, for example, Chianti Classico, Montalcino, Maremma, which is a new starting or has started a few years ago with also Sangiovese wines. So you can make really excellent wines all over Tuscany, but if you want to earn money, then of course you have to choose a region where a bottle costs not just 2 or 3 euros.
And when would if I was to invest 25 million euros, when would I expect under regular circumstances to see that money back again? How many years?
How many years?
Like when would I earn my 25 million? If I'm investing it at some, return on investment under regular circumstances in Europe, would I get my money back? And when would that happen?
Okay. So if it is a running business and you are able and capable to then put it again to another level, we are talking at least about 10 years.
The ROI is 10 years.
If not longer. Yeah, if not longer. Because wine business is also an invest. It's always, let's say, whenever you have a perfectly equipped winery with a cellar, with modern equipment and everything. But over the years, of course, you have to change. You have to buy new barrels and so on. It's not just that you have your equipment, you have your wine business. You just pay your staff to make the wine production. But of course, you're going to invest. And if you want to take it to the next level, what most of people want to do, even if it's just a nice lifestyle investment, then of course you are constantly investing. Not a lot of money, but you're going to constantly invest.
Well, barrels. I think when I started doing this business, barrels were like $400. Now they're like $1,200, and
yes.
And then you've got changes that occur in the wine business, which I think is a very important part of of investing in a winery or anything that's agricultural, but wine in more particular, particularly organic or biodynamic wines, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is I'm not going to get that same yield every year from those vineyards, or I'm going to want to reduce the yield to hopefully increase the quality of the grapes, or I'm going to want to increase the yield and maybe reduce the quality of the grapes a little bit to get more volume. So I have to make all these decisions that would certainly play into this return on investment of 10 years. If I want to buy an organic winery, what do you tell your clients are some of the inherent risks to an organic or biodynamic farm versus a conventional farm? Are there any additional risks? Is really a question.
Yeah, wine is a natural product. So first of all, of course, each year is different. So even if you have conventional wine production in comparison to organic wine production, a lot of wineries which are not certified organic, they work nearly the same nowadays, because most of them have realized that it is important to bring a very good product to the wine drinker, and so there is not such a huge difference. There's of course a difference between biodynamic and organic, because with biodynamic production, of course, you have to be every day aware of the weather conditions, of the heat, of rain, of everything, and that's much more work. So this is much more effort you have to bring.
Are the operating costs to biodynamic farming 20% more, 50% more than a conventional farm?
In terms of staff and the daily work, it would be 20 to 30%.
Because there was one argument that pesticides, herbicides, insecticides are not inexpensive either. They're expensive, and that actually possibly running a conventional farm could cost more than organic. I find that hard to believe in my understanding of particularly biodynamic farming, where you have to be like intimately knowledgeable about basically each vine, because the soil changes, everything changes in a matter of meters, and so each vine sort of needs hand holding. Is that accurate?
Yes, right. But conventional winemaking does not mean that you know what your wine production is like every year. Even with conventional wine production, every vintage is different. So it is always wine changes over all the years. Every vintage is different.
Well, it's funny. And I've said this before on the show many times, but I think it's so important. Michel Roland was consulting with a friend of mine's winery in Armenia, and he told her, yes, you can grow here. You can probably grow nice grapes. It's been actually, the region's very, very old for wine, but now when you start to plant, it's going to take us around 100 years to figure this out. And she's like, I don't have 100 years. I'm already 35 years old, So, but the sentiment is accurate. There's so many variables when it comes to farming that could affect your grapes that it would take you a long time to know all of the different emaciations to make decisions on what you're going to do when it's time to farm. And so how does global warming then play into some of the decisions of these buyers? And what part of the world have you seen the greatest effect of global warming in the wine business?
Yes. So of course, there's a huge impact of the global warming on different areas, wine-grown regions, and more in the southern part of Europe than in other, let's say, also in Germany. Of course, every region is warming, but it is more in Italy and southern parts of France where they really get difficulties with the drought. So, and of course, they have to change their mind concerning their own wines, because, as you know, with the heat, there's more alcohol in the wine at the end. And so this is a different way of farming. Some try to shadow the wines. Some are already thinking about making new vineyards in other regions, not in other regions, but in other plots of their vineyards. They are changing grapes. So Yeah, they are all concerned.
There is this is not political, and I have to say this, and I got in trouble. One of my listeners said, "Wow, I can't believe you say that. It's not political." Well, it's not. Global warming, I think, is obvious. I think particularly in our industry, it's seen and obvious. And like you mentioned, it changes the alcohol content of wine. It can change a lot. At the same time, what's interesting, what it's done is it's opened up other parts of the world to wine growing that otherwise weren't very good at it. Let's just say Sussex, England, where they're making what I think world-class champagne or sparkling wine. And I found my father's notes from his travels in the 70s to England wine country, and they're not very good.
Definitely.
Have you done business in England since this sort of new appellation has occurred?
Yes, of course. We also looked at the, let's say, Sussex vineyards, and of course we are in some projects there with some of our clients, and of course that's very interesting because it's amazing that you are able to produce champagne there, even if you're not allowed to call it champagne. But yeah. So this is one of the advantages for some regions, but is a disadvantage for other regions. I wouldn't say it's a disadvantage. It's more like a change of mind. It's also a new chance maybe to change some of the vineyards to also regarding, let's say, water systems. So there's a lot of changes.
Mm-hmm. There's even some of the districts of Burgundy that were lesser known or lesser pedigree have now produced, some pretty interesting wines. And in fact, I did notice this may or may not be related to global warming and the difference, because Burgundy is hard hit by this. But I have noticed that a raise in quality over the last few years of entry level Burgundy, because in my general opinion, entry level Burgundy, the whites and the reds, they don't really match up to their equivalent counterparts in other parts of the world as far as I think the palatability and the quality of the wine. But I've had some very good Bourgogne Rouge and Bourgogne Blanc lately that would have been different a few years ago, and so some of these districts are getting better, even in
they are definitely
as well.
Right.
Some of the village
we also
wines
have
are
a lot
really
of requests. We have a lot of requests for Burgundy because wine just have changed so much, and a lot of people would like to invest into Burgundy, which is interesting.
So actually, that is interesting. I've told a story, but most or many wine enthusiasts that really want to understand this business more, actually the wine itself, they say all roads leads to the study of Burgundy, and I'm there now, and that's a very expensive study because the wines are expensive, but the change in terroir, the tectonic plate changes, if you really want to get granular, how the tap roots are touching certain types of soil as they go deeper and deeper is pretty fascinating. But I understand that there's some very archaic laws, or let's say ancient laws, anciens, as they would in France, that preclude outsiders from, or make it difficult from non-French or non-Burgundians to own land there. Is that true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's not only for Burgundy, it's also for other wine regions, for Champagne, all the renowned wineries. It's kind of inner circle. A lot of wineries in this area. If you talk about Barolo, if you go to Brunello, it's always the same. So there are a lot of people from the area who build up the wineries, and from time to time, of course, there's a new investor coming in, buying a vineyard, bringing it also to the next level. But of course, people do not want to let a lot of investors into the wine region. So this is also a work which has to be done very carefully, and what investors are always welcomed welcome whenever they are open to the region, when they want to understand the culture of winemaking in the special region, and this is also some of our advice, of course.
How long would I have to wait if I came to you in another role play, in another telephone call? Bettina, I would like to own a winery in Burgundy, a physical winery, the actual structure. And maybe there's some pretty small plots out there, so maybe a couple of hectares. How long would I have to wait for you to find something that the government would allow me to buy?
Well, sometimes you're lucky and you immediately identify something, or we have something, but otherwise it can take 1 year, 2 years. So when you're looking to buy into a special region, then you need also some time. It's not that you immediately find something. So, for example, in renowned wine regions like Piedmont, Montalcino, there are only a few vineyards available, some hectares, not even a complete winery with cellar equipment and so on. And so there are single opportunities, not really off market, not really known to everybody. And this is what we can offer in this moment. When you want us to search, we go and search for you. But of course, this takes time, because sometimes we are able to immediately identify. Sometimes it takes longer.
Because I think I've seen listings before in Bordeaux, where it seems like if I really wanted a chateau in Bordeaux, I could find one rather easily compared to Burgundy or Montalcino. I assume some of the premium districts of Italy are the same as far as the scarcity of availability. But for sure, I've just noticed, because I think I'm a Francophile, that it's much easier and faster and available are wineries in Bordeaux versus Burgundy. Do you find, is that true?
Yeah.
Do you find a reception issue? Let's see, how am I going to put this? Do you find if I'm an American and I want to buy a winery in Bordeaux, let's say, are there issues with how the locals perceive me or treat me or engage me?
Sometimes, yes, of course. but as people used to travel a lot nowadays, and people, they are in different cultures. They try to understand different cultures. Of course, it's like everywhere. Whenever you come to a small village and you're new to this village, people will look at you. They will not immediately make friendship with you, of course. And so it's always the same all over the world. And of course, if you're then entering into such exciting business like wine business, of course, everybody looks at you. Everybody wants to understand what you're doing. If you're doing it the right way, and right way, there are so many different right ways for different people. So yes, of course.
I mean, culturally, wine is so much more embedded in Europe. I mean, obviously, it's much older. It's more family. There's more lineage. There's more generations that come and go through wineries. I was reading a book that Madame May Alan-Langsant from Comtesse Lalande wrote, and she talks about that history of that chateau, and it's steeped in tradition, but less in America. There is some tradition growing. There are some families that are handing off to the next generation, maybe the third time, but that's pales in consideration of some wineries in Europe that have been around since the 1200s, the 13th century. Do you see that reception different from part to part? Like, in other words, if I have $100 million and I want to go buy a fancy Napa Valley chateau, that I probably would be, I'm not going to say warmer, the reception wouldn't be necessarily warmer, but easier, because let's face it, Napa is sort of a commercial part of the world when it comes to wine. And so whoever has enough money gets to play.
So no, I wouldn't say that it's easier or more difficult. It's whenever you have 100 million, you want to invest in a vineyard, and there's somebody on the market. Of course, you can enter. It's not a problem. Yeah,
Purely
it's more the question. Yeah. Yes, of course. But no, it's of course, yeah, you have to make due diligence. You have to understand, you know, it must be the right fit between buyer and seller. Yeah.
Right.
If somebody says, look, my winery is profitable, I want to sell it. Well, I'm not sure whether I want to sell it. There's no family succession, but right now I'm not sure whether I really want to sell it. It's profitable. So then somebody comes and says, look, this is a winery I always look for. I want to buy it. So setting up a price, making due diligence. But apart from all this, it must be also a right fit between seller and buyer, because the seller who brought up this business for over 20 years or even longer, it's a family business for about 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to sell his baby in a way.
That's true.
So if the incoming buyer, if the incoming new owner is sensitive enough to understand this, and then taking over and going also in this direction. Yeah, of course, everybody's going to change, bring it to the next level. Changes are sometimes needed, but some people wouldn't sell if they don't have this impression that it will proceed in a certain way, like they did.
That's you struck a chord. Actually, this Friday is my wife and mine last day in the e-commerce side of wine. It's gotten very complicated, difficult. It needs fresh eyes. It needs fresh blood. It needs a little bit of economies of scale where there's, larger purchasing opportunities to lower the costs with not only wine, but shipping, et cetera. And I've actually, now that you mentioned this, turned away 2 buyers and maybe walked away from, more money, but I didn't want to sell it to these guys. I didn't trust them. I didn't think it was a good fit. I didn't think they knew what they were doing. I didn't think that I'd want to train them. I had spent a lot of time with somebody once they, closed escrow and we had to, continue. So that's a really good thought. And I would think with the wine business, particularly somebody's family business, that would be a very important part of a sale.
Yes. And sometimes it's not very often, but sometimes when you have a buyer who then said, okay, I want to buy in Italy because I love Tuscany, I love the region, and I want to have a typical wine, and then you start advising, you bring them to different wineries, you show him the different wine production of Sangiovese, which is typical for this area. Yeah. And then he said, okay, I'm interested in buying, for instance, in Montalcino for 1 million. So we are going to buy 2 hectares. But, I'm not really interested in making Sangiovese. I want to introduce a Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc wine, Bordeaux style. So, well, then it is very difficult to advise.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I always jest about super Tuscans because, that's basically they took declassified grapes, grew them anyway, and then charged us a lot of money for Cabernet Merlot grown, and what otherwise there wouldn't be.
No, there are a lot of super Tuscans. There are a lot of super Tuscans. Of course they are. But look, it's the same. You're going to Champagne, and instead of making Champagne, you trying to produce a red wine. Yeah, it's you always have to, let's say, whenever you're searching a special region and you want to be there because it's Montalcino, you want to be there because it's Piedmont, then of course you should respect the way of wine production there in the region. Of course, you can always make your super Tuscan or your IGT wine to sell it at an even better price, higher price, as many do.
Well, I don't believe that all grapes grow everywhere and produce wines of great pedigree. And I think that, I have this sort of philosophical approach to wine in that what grows together goes together when it comes to food and wine. And there's a reason why over time these grapes have evolved. Even the history of wine in California, which starts in the 1700s, the grapes, none of the grapes that they were growing in those days exist anymore, maybe one, because they found that the better suited grapes for better soils and better character, and everything's better about it. Interested to know what with the pandemic, the wineries that were well equipped with e-commerce in Napa, and I was up there just weeks before the pandemic hit. The rumor of the pandemic and the lockdown were occurring, and there were a lot of wineries that had no internet presence of any consequence. And as we know, it's very important for a winery to have a direct-to-consumer club. It has a lot to do with their profitability because they get retail, sales out of right from the cost of manufacturing, and no distributor in the middle. But how did Europe react to this? Is it important in Europe to have a robust e-commerce business? And if you didn't during the pandemic, were there issues?
Yes, there were, for some family wine businesses, there were huge issues during the pandemic, because then they realized that, of course, they weren't able, because a lot of distributors and retailers, they had full stock, because also they had some struggles to sell the wine. So whenever distributors and retailers sold their wine, they took it out of the stock, but they were not reordering wine.
Mm-hmm.
So wineries realized, especially smaller family-owned wine businesses, they realized that they had really missed to build up an e-commerce online shop. Of course, during pandemic times, a lot of wineries then realized and started building up in their own shops. Yeah.
Are there any restrictions? We have 50 states in the United States. I contend that we never actually repealed prohibition. We only gave it 50 different versions by taking it off the federal rolls, but every state has their own prohibitions. If I remember right, there aren't any really in Europe, but I'm wondering if you go from Italy to France or France to Spain or Spain to Italy, if there are shipping restrictions to wine.
No. They are not really.
I'm in the wrong.
Not in Europe, but of course, with Great Britain, with the Brexit, it became an issue, and of course, whenever you're going shipping outside Europe, yeah, and
what other parts of the United States have you sold or bought a winery in besides California? Have you done any business like in Vermont or Texas or the what they call the Sun Belt states, Arizona?
No, it was Napa Valley.
Just Napa Valley. It makes a ton of sense. I mean, Temecula.
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
No, it's not that we haven't different opportunities in Vermont and different wineries, but it's more Napa Valley.
The chart I was telling you about, which was posted a few days ago, it showed. It was very interesting, actually. Most of the regions, the popular regions, Mendocino, Napa, Sonoma, Central Coast, Santa Barbara, all this were down substantially, 20% in e-commerce sales, 20% in tasting room traffic. But one of the regions was not down so much, and that was Temecula, which is here in Southern California. The wines are fine, but the destination has become a wedding place. There's a lot of golf courses. And so it's a great sort of getaway without having to drive 6 hours to go to Napa or fly. You can drive to Temecula from Los Angeles in about an hour and 20 minutes or so. And all of a sudden you're in this different world, and it's wine related and it's festive and it's fun. And their sales, weren't hurt so badly. It was like 7% instead of the typical 20%. I found that fascinating. I thought it was really, really interesting. So what's on the hook right now? We're about to wrap this up. We almost got an hour here. But right now in your portfolio, what do you have for sale? Anything interesting?
Well, talking about Italy, we still have something interesting in Montalcino. We have something interesting in Piedmont.
Monte.
We have Piedmonte.
Piemonte.
Yeah, and we have a few wineries in Germany. We have some in France. Provence is very, very common. So people are looking for Provence wines. It's rosé wine most of the time, but there's a huge interest at the moment. And yes, of course, Bordeaux.
It's interesting. I have a very close friend. He's a chef, a very well-known chef. He was trained in Nice. He came to America in the late 70s, early 80s, and became very famous. His name was Chef Joachim, and he took his money from selling his restaurant chain and bought a chateau in Valois in the Rosé district in Provence. And we're going to have coffee next week because he's like slugging it out right now, and he makes wonderful wine, but he found out that this is tough to do, and particularly in Southern California, he's having a very hard time. And one of the reasons is, and I'm wondering if you've sensed this or seen this with some of your sales, because in America, the consolidation of distributors has been prolific. So each distributor now is getting much larger. All the small guys are going away. There's no individual importers, or there's none, but there are less importers that have people on the street that are bringing in interesting wines. And so now you end up in a giant book, a wholesaler like Southern Wines and Spirits or Young's or something, and they got these big books, and all of a sudden the wines are lost because the sales reps are trying to sell the stuff that makes them the most money or sends them to Hawaii or whatever. And all of a sudden these brands like chefs are being sort of walked over. Have you like on a post sale, has anybody come back to you and said, look, I didn't realize this was so hard, or why am I having difficulty here or there? Anybody do that?
No, because we are talking about branding. We are talking about that the brand is very important, that distribution chains are very important, that it is tough work to do. So we are also, let's say, offering management services after the acquisition for that reason, to guide the clients through these different steps. We start advising also during the acquisition phase. And yeah.
Interesting.
That's very important.
That's interesting.
But look, we do not only have, let's say, private wealth clients who are interested. We are also, let's say, have wine dynasties who are looking to acquire other vineyards to put it into their existing branding. These big companies all over the world. We also have hotel businesses who are looking to buy a hotel coming with a vineyard, with a wine business, because they want to link it to make it easier to sell wine to the hotel guests, coming back to this wedding style and event location. So there are a lot of different clients.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, this has been a fabulous conversation, and we're going to be in Italy in September. We're going to be in Tuscany. I'm not sure where this villa is, but I hope we have a chance to meet and have a glass of wine together.
Great. I would appreciate that.
As long as you're still going to be there. I don't know if you had a chance.
Yeah. I'm always traveling Germany, Italy, back and forth. So I will be in Italy in September.
Very good. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for the time this afternoon for you and this morning for me. But it's been a fascinating conversation.
Yes. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure, Paul.
You're welcome. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Wine Talks with Paul Kalamkarian. Don't forget to subscribe because there's more great interviews on their way. And of course, all these podcasts are sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, 48 years in business. Don't forget to visit our website, wineofthemonthclub.com. Folks, have a great time out there in the wine world. Cheers.